Good morning to you all. May I invite distinguished delegates to assume your seats so that we can get started with the morning session. This is to distinguished delegates, kindly take up your seats so that we can get started. We are late already. We've lost 10 minutes of our time. A very good morning once again. We shall begin our morning session. I invite distinguished delegates to refer to document 15.1. Yesterday we had asked friends of the chair, led by Australia, to discuss agenda item 15 and come back to us regarding the issues that needed discussion, particularly the areas where we should have COP-appointed councillors. So I will invite Australia to report back to the meeting regarding the discussions that went on in the Friends of the Chair contact group. Australia, are you in the house? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. So the Friends of the Chair group, in relation to the recommended COP-appointed councillor subject areas, had very productive discussions yesterday. The review process was agreed, noting that the process is flexible and the sessional committee will be able to react to emerging issues and topics and make recommendations to each COP if necessary. The composition of the recommended subject areas was agreed, with one small amendment to the marine fish position. This position will now be referenced as fish, including expertise on harvesting, to cover off that CMS may require expert advice on freshwater fish in the future. The nominations submitted to date for the new subject area positions have been applauded. However, some parties requested extra time to supply relevant nominations, particularly in relation to the terrestrial mammal position. As such, we agreed in the working group that parties could have until 6 p.m. today to submit additional nominations. Note that these nominations must contain all the required information as requested in the previous notification from the Secretariat. The Secretariat will then produce a comparative assessment for parties' consideration if we have more than one nomination for a new position. The review was conducted with extensive consultation occurring within the sessional committee, both of party members, current COP-appointed councillors and observers. The formulation of the recommended subject areas reflects this consultation. The sessional committee is not intending to set these new subject areas in stone for the future. We heard a number of useful suggestions from the floor yesterday for potential new subject areas, and these will be taken into consideration through the ongoing review process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Australia. I will open the floor just in case to confirm that what the Friends of the Chair came up with will deliver us. Do we have any variations on the proposed way forward from the Friends of the Chair? I see none. I take it that that will be the consensus of this meeting. And thank you, Australia, and all those that participated in the contact group for a job well done. As you have heard, you still have an opportunity to submit candidates up to 6 p.m. today. So parties that would like to nominate candidates, feel free to do so by submitting all the required documents. Thank you very much. Before we conclude the item, let me invite the Secretariat to give further clarifications on that agenda item.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I think the report provided by the distinguished representative of Australia actually covered all that is needed in terms of the guidance to parties in terms of submission of additional nomination. Just to remind that the notification, which includes instruction on the submission of nomination, is notification 2019-22, and can easily be found on the website of the CMS, as well as a link in document 15.1. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. I wish to remind you that in-session documents are already posted. We have CRPs already posted on the website. So I encourage you to keep checking in the in-session folder for the CRPs. We shall have an opportunity to begin clearing the CRPs starting this afternoon. So kindly check the in-session documents and familiarize yourselves with the documents that have been posted, so that when we get to clear them, we don't take a lot of time. I must tell you, we are still behind the schedule, so I implore you to assist me to catch up with our program. I will now invite chairs of working groups to update the meeting on progress so far in the working groups, starting with Budget Committee, Budget Working Group. Nora, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning. The Budget Working Group has had 2 meetings, and we're planning a 3rd one today and probably also tomorrow. So I'm hopeful that we will come up with a proposal after today's meeting, and if not, we will do the details tomorrow as well, and then we will do a walkthrough of the resolution, and then the target is to conclude at the end of the workshop session tomorrow. I think that's the short message from our working group. Thank you.
Thank you, Nore. Let's hear from the chair of the Avian Species Working Group.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Avian Working Group met last night for the 2nd time, with many parties and observers in attendance. We've gone through all 5 avian documents which were sent to the working group from the CAO. We finalised discussions on document 2615, the action plans for birds, and a conference room paper has been produced and is online. And we still have some outstanding issues to discuss in the 4 remaining documents on illegal killing, land birds, flyways, and poisoning, and we shall also be discussing the listing proposal for the little bustard. 3 small contact groups will be meeting during lunch to discuss alternative wording to open points, and we will meet again this evening at 6:30 in the Working Group 1 meeting room, and hopefully be able to conclude on the remaining open issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair of the Avian Working Group. Let's hear from Terrestrial Species Working Group.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. Terrestrial Working Group met yesterday the first time with the parties and observers, and once the Terrestrial Working Group related documents not presented at the Conference of the Whole, we shared some comments and positions, and then we are waiting when it is introduced officially. Thank you.
Thank you, Terrestrial Species Working Group. Let's hear from Aquatic Species Working Group.
Thank you, Chair. The chair of the Aquatic Working Group asked me to report on his behalf, as he'll be a little bit later. The Aquatic Working Group had 9 documents referred to it. We managed to go through all of them and include the comments received from parties and observers. 6 are online in English as conference room paper, so we have concluded the work. 1 is pending the discussion on light pollution and can be finalized immediately after that. 2 documents are still going to be discussed in the next session. Those are chondrichthyon species and bycatch. And the listing proposals relevant for aquatic will also still be discussed in our session, and we are proposing to meet at 7 p.m. tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, respective working groups, for the progress so far made. We shall now move to agenda item 26.3, terrestrial species. I invite distinguished delegates to look at document 26.3.1 on joint CITES CMS African Carnivore Initiative. I now invite the Secretariat to introduce the document.
Thank you, Chair. Document 26.3.1 Ref 1 reports on progress made to implement decisions 1255 to 1270 relating to the joint CITES CMS African Carnivores Initiative, in short the ACI, and the conservation and management of lion as well as cheetah and African wild dog. In cooperation with the CITES Secretariat, the CMS Secretariat launched the initiative at the first range state meeting of the ACI held in November 2018. This meeting was made possible through the financial support received from Belgium, Germany, and Switzerland. The meeting was attended by 31 of 47 range states who are parties to CMS and/or CITES. The draft resolution and decisions contained in Annexes 1 and 2 of the document before you compile all of the recommendations made by the first meeting of the ACI. Annex 1 includes the recommendation to the Secretariat to submit a draft resolution in order to provide the ACI with a long-term perspective. It also includes a draft decision to develop a joint program of work with the CITES Secretariat and IUCN. In this regard, I am pleased to let you know that CITES COP13 already adopted a decision instructing the CITES Secretariat to develop a program of work for the ACI in close cooperation with the CMS Secretariat and IUCN. Also following the recommendation of the first meeting of the ACI, the government of Germany provided funding for a junior professional officer to support the implementation of the ACI. I am happy to inform you that this position has been filled last week, so that our new colleague, Ms. Nora Weyer, was able to join us for COP. Comments were provided by the Scientific Council in respect to the draft resolution, as well as decisions 13AA on the joint initiative and several paragraphs of the decision on the conservation and management of the cheetah and African wild dog. The comments are contained in the addendum to this document. With that in mind, the COP is invited to consider the draft resolution and decisions contained in this document, and for consistency, delete decisions 1255 to 1270. This has been an omission in the document before you. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. I now invite very brief, indeed very brief comments on document 26.3.1 and attendant addendum so that we can refer the document to the terrestrial working group. So kindly make your interventions very brief. I will recognize the European Union.
Thank you, Chair. The EU and its member states believe that the joint CITES CMS African Carnivores Initiative represents an excellent example of how different institutions and conventions should work together synergistically in a complementary fashion to pursue common objectives. The cooperation between CMS, CITES, and IUCN for the support of range states under this initiative will maximize the effective and immediate conservation of African carnivores if properly implemented. In this regard, the EU and its member states welcome the outcome of the first African Carnivore Initiative meeting, which was held in November 2018 in Germany, as well as the decisions taken at the CITES COP13. It is great to see that CMS and CITES COPs, as well as their secretariats, move hand in hand on this topic. With the resolution before us, the initiative is properly established for the long term. The EU and its member states therefore support the adoption of the draft resolution contained in Annex 1 of this document, together with amendments proposed by the Scientific Council. It is essential that, as a next step, the African Carnivore Initiative develops a program of work that foresees concrete conservation activities. In this regard, we support the adoption of the draft decisions contained in Annex 2 of this document as amended by Scientific Council and the process foreseen therein. We take note of the executive summary of the guidelines on the conservation of lions in Africa contained in Annex 3. We also take note of the roadmap for the conservation of leopard in Africa contained in Annex 4. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, EU. CITES.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everybody. As we heard from the CMS colleagues, the CITES parties agreed at COP18 that the African Carnivore Initiative be included in the new CMS-CITES joint work program for the period 2021 to 2025, and that the CITES and CMS secretariats, in collaboration with ICN, as appropriate, develop a dedicated program of work for this initiative to be reviewed by both of our standing committees. The draft decisions in Annex 2 of the present document are fully in line and compatible with what was agreed at CITES COP18. I should note, however, that the CITES parties have not yet considered the need for adopting a resolution on the ACI. Regarding lions and leopards, the proposed draft decisions in Annex 2 are matching similar decisions adopted at CITES by the CITES parties COP18, which, among other things, call for acting upon the guidelines for the conservation of lions in Africa and the roadmap for leopard conservation in Africa, developed by ICN and shown in Annexes 3 and 4 of the document, and these need to be integrated in the work plan of the ACI. The CITES Secretariat therefore welcomes this document and the draft decisions it contains. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, CITES. IUCN.
Thank you, Chair. IUCN would like to make a general statement on Agenda Item 26 and the sub-items under this agenda item. IUCN, through its Species Survival Commission, including the antelope, African elephant, cat and equid specialist groups, have been supporting the African Carnivore Initiative, conservation of the African wild ass, the African Elephant Action Plan, and the Sahelo-Saharan megafauna, from development right the way through to implementation. IUCN's Save Our Species program, a regranting mechanism to support species conservation action on the ground, is already supporting implementation of the African Carnivore Initiative and the Central Asian Mammal Initiative. Given the urgency to scale up species conservation action, we look forward to continuing this work with the Convention. Regarding the African Carnivore Initiative, in view of the evidence for overall population declines, IUCN commends the collaboration between CMS and CITES. We offer to support the Secretariat and range states in the development of a program of work that aims to deliver on relevant decisions from previous COPs. We will continue to support the activities like the African Lion Database, the Leopard Roadmap, and the Cheetah and Wild Dog Strategies and Action Plans. We will refine the guidelines on lion conservation, in particular in the provision of harmonized protocols to monitor and survey African large carnivores. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, IUCN. I've not had any proposals for improvement in the text. do I take it that this meeting has no objection to the document and its annexes being adopted for recommendation for approval by plenary? Do you have any objection to the adoption of the resolution and the decisions and the guidelines in annexes 1 to 4? Nigeria, you want the floor? Take the floor, Nigeria.
Thank you, Chair. Nigeria would like to intervene on the African Carnivores Initiative. With regard to paragraph 31, which refers to the results of the International Expert Workshop that took place in Seville, Spain, in April 2018, on non-detriment findings for hunting trophies of certain African species, included CITES Appendix 1 and 2. It was brought to our attention that yesterday evening, at the Terrestrial Working Group, Senegal raised concern over lack of consensus and representativeness of this workshop. Nigeria would like to share these concerns expressed by Senegal. Paragraph 31 states that the results of this workshop represents valuable capacity building tools for Paris and the African lion range states and contributes substantially to the implementation of Decision 12.67, paragraph A, V, 5. We do not agree with these conclusions for several reasons. One being that it is unfeasible to develop common NDF guidelines that work for all countries involved in the trophy hunting trade. In addition, we know that CITES parties were underrepresented at this workshop. On behalf of Nigeria, I regret that parties of the West African region were not invited to participate to this workshop. It was reported that the majority of experts in attendance, sorry, Chair. I'll take that paragraph, that sentence again.
Nigeria, kindly assist us to be clear on which document, which annex are you talking about? We have annexes 1 to 4. That's where the decisions and resolutions are.
That's Decision 12.67. Paragraph A 5. Chair, are you okay?
Nigeria, that's a background document. It's not a decision to be taken by this meeting. It's just a background. The decisions are on, they start in Annex 1. Annex 1, which is page 16 of the document. But in case you have comments on the background, we can still take them as comments for the record of the meeting.
Okay. Shall I continue? Chair.
You have the floor, Nigeria, please.
Okay. Let me conclude. On behalf of Nigeria, I regret that parties of the West African region were not invited to participate to this workshop. It was reported that the majority of experts in attendance were from the trophy hunting industry and hunting lobbying organizations, with very few independent scientists. In conclusion, the survey workshop report to which the document refers to does not represent a consensus among the CITES parties, and the conclusions of the workshop reported were not agreed during the plenary section of the 30th meeting of the CITES Animals Committee. We therefore ask that all references to the results of the workshop within the framework of the African Carnivore Initiative be deleted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nigeria. We take note of the comments made. I see Born Free Foundation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We welcome document 26.3.1 and support the adoption of the draft resolutions and decisions alongside the Scientific Council's recommendations. We further urge parties to incorporate recognition of the value of collaboration with CMS partner organisations and wider IGOs and NGOs, engagement with transit and consumer countries in respect of trade-related issues, and the importance of effective enforcement into the draft resolution and decisions. We agree with the concerns expressed by Nigeria regarding the reference in paragraph 31 of document 2631 to the report from the Seville workshop on non-detriment findings. We would refer delegates to information document 34, submitted by a number of organisations, including a number who were represented at the workshop, for details of our concerns. Thank you.
Cheetah Conservation Fund. Oh, sorry. Let's have Senegal first. Senegal.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Bonjour tout le monde. Nous saluons cette initiative de coopération entre la CITES et la CMS pour la conservation des carnivores et pour la conservation même de toutes les espèces vulnérables. Nous apprécions cette collaboration avec la CITES. C'est vraiment quelque chose d'indispensable, surtout pour les populations de carnivores au niveau de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, surtout où nous n'avons plus beaucoup de carnivores en liberté. Les licaons, par exemple, sont vraiment menacés. Il ne reste que quelques populations résiduelles dans le parc du Nyokolokoba. Donc, nous appuyons fortement cette collaboration et nous encourageons la CMS à développer d'autres formes aussi de collaboration pour la sauvegarde d'autres espèces. Excepté notre réserve, donc sur le paragraphe 31, cette réunion, nous n'avons pas été invités à cette réunion et les décisions prises dans cette réunion ne nous agréent pas. Donc, nous appuyons le collègue du Nigeria pour que ce paragraphe 31 soit enlevé du document. Merci.
Thank you very much, Senegal. Cheetah Conservation Fund.
Thank you, Chair. As this is the first time I take the floor, I would like to thank India for hosting the COP and their generous welcome. The Cheetah Conservation Fund fully supports the African Carnivores Initiative and the draft resolutions as included in the annexes, but we would like to further support the amendments offered by the Scientific Committee, as offered in Addendum 1, and as the EU also supports. So we would like to clarify, Chair, when you said that there are no objections to the draft resolutions, if that includes also the addendum, and that would also be accepted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Cheetah Conservation Fund. Yes, I confirm that we are discussing both the document and addendum from the Scientific Council. So yes, you are very right. Let's have Conservation Force.
Thank you, Chair. We welcome this document and the annexes. In particular, we would like to refer to the intervention from the CITES Secretariat, whereby CITES decided not to have a resolution at this time. It was thought to be premature, but to go along with a series of decisions which matches practically the decisions which are before us here. And on this decision, we would like also to stress the importance to open up the collaboration on this initiative to all interested stakeholders and experts, and to give a lot of importance to the future program of work, because we understand that range states would like to test the effectiveness of this initiative, so they would like to understand how this program of work will develop and how it can help with the conservation and sustainable use of this species. On the intervention of Nigeria, Chair, this was discussed yesterday in the terrestrial working group. I believe that it could come up even this evening again. The Chair can report on this, and it's not a problem, Chair. CITES has endorsed the conclusion of the Sevilla workshop, and being the African Carnivores Initiative, a common initiative between CMS and CITES, we believe there should be a reciprocal endorsement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Conservation. First, I want to come back to the meeting. Do we have any proposed change in draft resolution in Annex 1 and the decisions in Annex 2, 3, and 4? Because the paragraph, the paragraph 31 is not going to be agreed. It's not a decision. It's just a background document, and the concerns raised by Senegal and Nigeria have been fully noted and will be included in the proceedings of the meeting. So I come back to you on the draft resolution and decisions. Do we have any objections to adoption of the Annex 1, 2, 3, and 4? I haven't had any contrary view to the adoption or any proposed amendments to the same. Do we have any objections to adoption of Annex 1, 2, 3, and 4? I see none. I take it that the Committee of the Whole recommends these documents to the plenary for adoption, and of course the comments and concerns raised by Senegal and Nigeria have been duly noted. Thank you very much. We shall move to just to confirm that what has been adopted includes the recommendations of the Scientific Council, just to be certain. I now invite the Secretary to introduce document 26.3.2 on the conservation of the African wild ass. Secretariat.
Thank you, Chair. Document 26.3.2 reports on progress made to implement Resolution 12.18 and Decision 12.71 on the conservation of the African wild ass. With funding from the Government of Germany and in cooperation with the IUCN Equid Specialist Group, it was possible to implement 2 activities provided in the roadmap to conserve the African wild ass. These activities related to understanding the nutritional overlap of wild ass populations with livestock in Eritrea and in Ethiopia, and details on the findings are provided in the document before you. The Secretariat is awaiting permission from the Government of Egypt for an expert to visit Elba National Park and assess the occurrence of African wild ass in Egypt. While continuing to support the range states with the implementation of the roadmap, the Secretariat proposes slight changes to Resolution 12.18, as well as the renewal of Decision 12.71, as contained in Annexes 1 and 2 of this document. The COP is invited to consider these changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. I now open the floor for brief comments on document 26.3.2. I invite parties to make comments on document 26.3.2 as introduced by the Secretariat. I recognize Ethiopia, please.
Thank you, Chair. As it is my first time to take the floor, I would like to extend my deepest gratitude and appreciation to the Indian government for hosting this important conference and to the Secretariat for the wonderful work to organize the COP. Mr. Chair, the African wild ass is one of the most threatened mammals in the world, which is in the verge of extinction, mainly due to anthropogenic factors. The small populations are not only occurring in fragmented habitats, but also move across international boundaries in search of pasture and water. Hence, creation of ecological connectivity and establishing transboundary conservation strategy that largely engages local community is the only option at the moment to ensure the survival of the species. Therefore, Ethiopia strongly supports the adoption of the amendment that enhance migratory species conservation of the critically endangered African wild ass. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ethiopia. I do not. Sénégal.
Monsieur le Président, bien que le Sénégal ne soit pas aire de répartition pour l'âne sauvage, nous appuyons fortement la résolution.
Thank you very much, Senegal. I do not see any further requests for the floor. Neither do I see or hear any opposition to the proposed amendment to the resolution and renew of the decision. So I put it to you that unless there is objection, that this meeting adopts the proposed amendment of the resolution and renew of the decision. Do you have any objections? I see none. I take it that the document is recommended to the plenary for adoption. Thank you very much. Let me now invite the Secretariat to introduce document 26.3.3 on the African Elephant Action Plan. Secretariat.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Secretariat would like to introduce document 26.3.3. This document reports on progress to implement Resolution 12.19, endorsement of the African Elephant Action Plan. The document also contains draft decisions in the annex. During the intersessional period, the CMS Secretariat was accepted as an ex-officio member of the African Elephant Fund Steering Committee in line with Resolution 12.19. The Secretariat attended all 3 steering committee meetings held in 2017, 18, and 19. The Secretariat maintained communication with the national focal points regarding funding opportunities provided by the African Elephant Fund. This endorsement of the African Elephant Action Plan by COP12 led to an enhanced partnership and coordinated efforts among the CMS, CITES, and AEF secretariats for the conservation of the African elephant. Against this background, the document recommends that the signatories of the CMS West African Elephant MOU align their activities with the African Elephant Action Plan to enhance synergies with ongoing conservation actions. The Scientific Council reviewed the document and welcomed the proposed consolidated approach for the conservation of the African elephant. The Secretariat also would like to inform parties that it organized an informal meetings of the signatory of the West African Elephant MOU on this Monday to facilitate initial discussion among the signatories on the future directions of the MOU. The conference of the party is invited to consider draft decisions in consideration of comments from the Scientific Council as contained in the addendum. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. I now open the floor. I recognize UNEP.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing us to take the floor on this important agenda item related to the African Elephant Action Plan. We thought that parties, and especially African elephant range states, would be interested in receiving a little bit more information related to the plan and to the African Elephant Fund. To provide a little bit of background on the African Elephant Action Plan, it was at the 14th meeting of the Conference of Parties to CITES in 2007 that parties adopted decisions on the African elephant. Those decisions mandated the African elephant range states to develop, among other things, an African Elephant Action Plan and subsequently an African Elephant Fund. At COP15, the parties adopted the African Elephant Action Plan as a principal strategy to support the range states to conserve and protect the African elephant across its range. UNEP subsequently created a trust fund to serve as a tool to implement the African Elephant Action Plan, and a secretariat was set up to host and administer the African Elephant Fund. This secretariat is governed by a steering committee, which is composed of donors and range state representatives. Since the adoption of the African Elephant Action Plan, the Trust Fund has received funding from several donors, and a total of 62 projects have been initiated across 38 African and range states to support them in protecting and conserving the African elephant. These projects have contributed to reduced poaching, mitigation of human-elephant conflicts, and restoration of elephant habitats, while enhancing cooperation among range states on conservation of cross-boundary populations. Mr. Chair, it's also important to note that discussions are currently ongoing among the range states for the revision of the African Elephant Action Plan. UNEP already convened 2 range states meetings in the margins of the CITES COP13 in August 2019 to discuss a way forward on the technical inputs prepared for review of the African Elephant Action Plan. During a CITES MIC meeting organized in Nairobi in November 2019, range states provided technical inputs and suggestions for the review and gave a mandate to the African Elephant Fund Steering Committee to oversee the revision exercise, which is scheduled to start in March at the 12th African Elephant Fund Steering Committee meeting in Uganda. The range states agreed to revise the African Elephant Action Plan, taking into account new emerging trends and also gaps that might not have been taken into account in the first version of the African Elephant Action Plan. As a follow-up to the adoption of the CMS COP, and as mentioned by the CMS Secretariat, CMS was welcomed as a new ex officio steering committee member, and the African Elephant Fund call for project proposals have been opened also to the CMS elephant range states. With this chair, we fully support the recommendations made to the signatories of the West African Elephant CMS MOU to align their activities with the African Elephant Action Plan, as it will enhance synergies with ongoing conservation actions. This recommendation is already, to a certain extent, a reality on the ground. After consultation with the CITES Secretariat, I would like also to inform the range states that CITES welcomes the draft decision in the annex to the document and stands ready to assist the CMS Secretariat and the signatories of the West African MOU in their implementation. This would be done through the CITES program on monitoring the illegal killing of elephants. With this, Mr. Chair, UNEP stands ready to provide more details on the functioning and the operational modalities of the African Elephant Fund. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, UNEP, and thank you for the support to African elephant conservation. Let me now take Senegal.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Nous saluons vraiment cette initiative heureuse du PNUE pour la création de ce fonds permettant le financement de plans d'action de l'éléphant d'Afrique. Comme vous le savez, l'éléphant fait partie de l'un des animaux les plus menacés en Afrique du point de vue de son abattage clandestin. Et conscient de cela, la CMS avait approché les parties en 2005 pour la mise en place d'un mémorandum d'accord pour la conservation de l'éléphant d'Afrique de l'Ouest. Et ce mémorandum avait été signé par 13 pays. Malheureusement, pour manque de financement, ce mémorandum n'a pas pu produire les résultats escomptés. Donc nous sommes vraiment heureux de cette initiative encore entre la CITES et la CMS pour sauver un des animaux les plus emblématiques d'Afrique. Donc nous appuyons fortement cette collaboration.
Thank you very much, Senegal. I have had only voices to support, so I now come back to you as the meeting. Do we have any objections to this meeting adopting decisions 13AA and 13BB contained in Annex to document 26.3.3? I see no objection. I take it that, I see Togo.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président. Au niveau de l'alinéa paragraphe 9, on voit bien que depuis que le mémorandum a été adopté, depuis 2015 et 2014, il y a une certaine léthargie, il y a très peu d'actions. Et si nous trouvons vraiment la pertinence de ce mécanisme, il va falloir qu'il y ait une disposition claire pour la mobilisation des fonds afin de soutenir ce mémorandum parce que jusqu'ici, tel que c'est mentionné, il y a très peu d'activités. S'il n'y a pas de stratégie claire, je pense qu'avec le temps, ce mémorandum et son mécanisme de fonctionnement ne sera plus efficace. Et donc je souhaite que la conférence envisage la nécessité d'inclure un paragraphe qui prévoit comment on pense redynamiser ce mécanisme dans le futur. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Togo, are you proposing to amend the draft decisions? Do you have a text you would like to add? Would you like to add a paragraph on the draft decisions?
Oui, je pourrais faire une proposition, mais pas tout de suite, si vous le permettez.
Okay, I will give you a chance to come up with the formulation and submit it to the Secretariat. We can then, in that case, refer this to the terrestrial working group where that paragraph can be considered. Do you have any objection to referring this document to the working group then, given Togo's intervention? UNEP, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Juste pour peut-être donner un peu de clarté à la résolution, juste pour donner plus d'informations peut-être au délégué qui vient du Togo, la proposition qui est faite ici est vraiment d'utiliser le plan d'action pour l'éléphant d'Afrique et le fonds que nous avons déjà, qui est donc administré par le Programme des Nations Unies pour l'environnement, comme programme de travail pour le protocole d'accord qui a été signé. L'idée est donc de passer du protocole d'accord au fond directement. Donc nous avons déjà un mécanisme de financement qui est en place où nous avons des propositions de projets qui sont déjà faites par les États de l'aire de répartition et donc ces propositions de projets viennent au PNUE et elles sont revues par le comité directeur pour pouvoir les approuver. Donc en matière de mécanisme de financement, il y a déjà un mécanisme de financement qui est en place et donc je voulais pour rendre cette idée-là très claire au Togo pour qu'on puisse avoir une discussion avec le même niveau d'information. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, UNEP. Togo UNEP is clarifying that actually there is already a funding mechanism under the Africa Elephant Fund. So the mechanism already exists. With that clarification, I come back to you, Togo. Would you have any objection to adoption of the draft decisions?
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président. peut-être le mentionner clairement parce que pour moi, l'avenir de ce mécanisme dépend des fonds, mais s'il peut y avoir une ligne qui l'explicite clairement, on sera confiant que ce mémorandum aura de l'avenir.
All right. It appears that Togo still has concerns, and they would wish to see some more decisions on the funding arrangements. In the interest of time, since we can't go into detailed discussion, I propose that we refer this matter further to the terrestrial working group so that they can have further discussion and conclude it. Do we have any objection to that approach? I see none. Let's refer this to the working group for finalization. So Togo, kindly submit the proposed text you would want added to the Secretariat so that it can be considered in the working group. Also to remind other delegates, if you have any changes you would wish to make on the documents, whether we've discussed them here or not, feel free to forward the comments to the Secretariat to enable interpretation and also advance consideration so that by the time we discuss them, they are already processed. So we shall move to agenda item 26.3.4, Saharo-Saharan megafauna. Let me invite the Secretariat to introduce document 26.3.4.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Secretariat would like to introduce two documents related to the Saharo-Saharan megafauna. Document 26.3.4 and document 28.2.4, if that's acceptable to you, Mr. Chair. Okay. So parties are invited to read two documents together as these documents are complementary. Document 26.3.4 reports on progress to implement Resolution 9.21, Rev COP12, Saharo-Saharan megafauna. The document also contains proposed amendments to the resolution in Annex 1 and the draft decision in Annex 2. The proposed amendments to the resolution include a reference to an ecosystem approach and the United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration 2021 to 2030. The draft decision is a transfer of operative paragraph 4 of Resolution 9.21 Rev COP12 into a decision in accordance with Resolution 11.6 Rev COP12 review of decisions, because this is a time-bound activity. Document 28.2.4 is the proposal for the continuation of the Saharo-Saharan megafauna concerted action. The concerted action was first established in 1994. 6 species have been covered under the concerted action. Building on the experience since 1994, the proposal recommends the inclusion of 2 additional species listed on the CMS appendices in the Saharo-Saharan megafauna concerted action, the red-fronted gazelle and the Barbary sheep. The proposed activities are presented in Table 1 of the proposal. The Scientific Council reviewed document 26.3.4 and made a specific comment on the wording of draft decision 13.AA as contained in the addendum. On the proposal for the continuation of the concerted action, the Scientific Council made 2 specific comments as included in the addendum. Regarding the status of the Barbary sheep pointed out by the Scientific Council, the Secretariat would like to inform parties that the IUCN Caprinine Specialist Group clarified that indeed the last red list assessment of this species was from 2008, and that the reassessment is currently being undertaken. The Conference of the Parties is invited to consider the amendments to Resolution 9.21, Rev. COP12, and the draft decision as contained in document 26.3.4 in consideration of the comments from the Scientific Council. In addition, the Conference of the Parties is invited to decide on the acceptance or rejection of the proposal for the continuation of the Sahelo-Saharan megafauna concerted action as presented in document 28.2.4. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretariat. I invite distinguished delegates to make comments on document 26.3.4 and document 28.2.4. I recognize the European Union.
Thank you, Chair. The EU and its member states support the adoption of the proposed amendments to Resolution 9.21 with a small addition in preambular part. And I apologize, Chair, I am now talking about the document 26.3.4 on Sahelo-Saharan megafauna. The EU and its member states also support the adoption of the draft decision with some minor changes. We will submit the proposed changes in writing, and I would just like to ask if I may read the proposed changes now, or should I just submit them in writing?
I would suggest you submit them in writing, since we shall have a detailed discussion in the working group, given that we have comments.
Okay, thank you, Chair. And also regarding the agenda item 28.2.4 on continuation of concerted actions, we feel the Sahelo-Saharan megafauna initiative and concerted actions associated with it proved to be strong and effective conservation tool for the past 25 years. Therefore, the EU and its member states welcome and support continuation of concerted actions and all activities related to conservation of Sahelo-Saharan megafauna. Furthermore, EU and its member states welcome conservation activities aligned with an ecosystem approach, aiming to maintain or restore habitats for the Sahelo-Saharan megafauna and their implementation in revised action plan through cross-sectoral coordination. This approach will contribute not solely to the species and habitat conservation, but to the UN Decade of Ecosystem Restoration as well. In addition, the EU and its member states would like to suggest that NGOs already acting on this issue be involved in Activity 4, strengthen partnership with relevant international and regional organizations, and multilateral environmental agreements. Finally, the EU and its member states would like to highlight that the insecurity which is increasing in the whole Sahelo-Saharan area should be mentioned as a major risk in section likelihood of success. We have some minor additions which we will also submit in writing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, EU. Let's take United Arab Emirates.
Thank you, Chair. We have a brief comment on document 28.2.4, and we will be submitting it in written. Thank you.
Thank you, UAE. Let's have Senegal.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Nous appuyons fortement cette résolution et la continuation des actions concertées pour ces espèces, parce que l'outil d'action concertée a beaucoup contribué à la conservation des espèces sahélo-sahariennes, et le Sénégal, dans sa politique de restauration de ses habitats, mise beaucoup sur cette action concertée, ces actions concertées pour le repeuplement de ces zones désertiques où certaines espèces sahélo-sahéliennes avaient complètement disparu, mais grâce à ces actions de concertation, à ces actions concertées, a pu vraiment faire le repeuplement au niveau des zones nord du pays où certaines espèces avaient complètement disparu. Donc nous appuyons fortement la résolution pour la continuation de ces actions. Merci.
Thank you very much, Senegal. I will propose that we refer the document 26.3.4 and 28.2.4 to the Terrestrial Working Group for further processing and finalization. I see no objection, so Terrestrial Working Group, please handle as appropriate. Let me now invite the Secretariat to introduce document 26.3.5 on Central Asian Mammals Initiative.
Thank you, Chair. So document 26.3.5 reports on the progress made to implement Resolution 11.24 on the Central Asian Mammals Initiative and its associated program of work 2014 to 2020. The document contains two annexes, Resolution 11.24 with proposed amendments, taking into account, for instance, the proposal to cover additional species, namely the goby bear, Persian leopard, and the urial, as well as the new program of work covering the period 2021 to 2026 in Annex 2. The revised resolution and the new program of work were developed during a range states meeting funded by the government of Germany and hosted by the government of Mongolia in September 2019 in Ulaanbaatar. The Scientific Council made two specific comments on the document, one on preambular paragraph 2 of the resolution and one on activity 10.2 in the proposed new program of work relating to Asiatic cheetah. The Conference of the Parties is requested to adopt Resolution 11.24 with proposed amendments and the program of work in its annex.
Thank you very much, Secretariat. I now invite comments on the document. I recognize Mongolia.
Thank you, Chair. Mongolia would like to address on behalf of CMS member and range states those participated to the second meeting of signatories of Central Asian Mammal Initiative. Mongolia hosted the second meeting of the initiative in September 2019 as part of the Central and Northeast Asian Wildlife Week event with the support of German government, UK government, and also the CMS Secretariat. Taking this opportunity, on behalf of the government of Mongolia, a Mongolian delegate wished to express appreciation to German government and UK government, WWF and WCS, and also national stakeholders for their support to organize it successfully. The Wildlife Week focused on illegal wildlife trade, wildlife disease, and also CAMI. Countries agreed to have joint statement aiming to strengthen sub-regional and transboundary cooperation. Considering the importance of international cooperation to implement each country's conservation actions, Mongolia reassures its continuing role to establish sub-regional wildlife sustainable conservation mechanism, which the government committed at the London Illegal Wildlife Conference in 2018. So let me back to the CAMI. The work program, the program of the work from 2021 to 2026 is developed with the key priorities, and also it is in line with cross-cutting sectors, and then also thankfully committed by the countries to maximize the efforts to achieve full implementation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mongolia. European Union.
Thank you, Chair. The European Union and its member states support adoption of the proposed amendments to Resolution 11.24 with certain minor changes and support the adoption of the program of work from 2021 to 2026. Regarding the work plan, we feel that it could benefit if it would also include estimation of costs for each of the actions identified, in order that potential donors have a better vision of what they could support. The EU and its member states will submit the proposed changes in writing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, EU. United Kingdom.
Thank you, Chair. The United Kingdom welcomes the continued success of the Central Asian Mammals Initiative and would like to congratulate participants on the success of the meeting of Kami Range States held during the Central and Northeast Asian Wildlife Week in Ulaanbaatar in September 2019. It was a great pleasure for the UK to be invited to attend and support Wildlife Week, which sought to build transboundary cooperation on matters of critical importance to the conservation of iconic wildlife across the region. Having participated in Wildlife Week and seen the challenges facing the region, we support the renewal of Kami's work through amendment of Resolution 11.24. We welcome the programme of work for 2021 to 2026, developed and agreed at the Kami Range State meeting. This ambitious programme of work, which includes measures to further community engagement, increase capacity development, and tackle the illegal wildlife trade, is a clear demonstration of regional commitments to transboundary cooperation on issues of vital concern to species conservation. We note the generous financial support to Kami from the governments of Germany and Switzerland and suggest, as already noted, that it would be helpful for potential donors if activities within the work programme could be costed. Furthermore, it might be helpful for parties if the Kami chair identified those initiatives within this work programme where parties, partner organisations and private sector actors could most usefully provide in-kind resources to support their implementation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, UK. Let's take Switzerland.
Thank you, Chair. Switzerland would like to congratulate the 14 range states of the Central Asian Mammals Initiative, Kami, for the progress made since the start of this important initiative back in 2014 in COP11 in Quito. Since we have been following and supporting Kami across the past 2 trienniums, we can really judge how far we have come, and we hope that this COP will be deciding on supporting the work plan for 2021 to 2026. Switzerland fully agrees with the amendments to Resolution 11.24 as they are prepared by the Secretariat and proposed by the Kami range states. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Switzerland. Let's have Uzbekistan.
Uzbekistan is taking the floor for the first time, not taking into account the misunderstandings that happened yesterday morning. On behalf of the Republic of Uzbekistan, I would like to thank the government of India and state of Gujarat for their hospitality and for providing this spectacular venue. And would like to congratulate Ms. Amy Frankel with the appointment. The Central Asian Mammals Initiative has been developed under CMS and has started its fruitful work in 2014 and is a great example for cooperation and connecting neighboring countries beyond borders for the purpose of managing and conservation of migratory mammals. The best example of the important work under Kami, as well as the MOU for the conservation of saiga antelopes, is the work to modify the fences in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan to maintain saiga migration between 2 countries. Mitigating the impacts of linear infrastructure is a great priority under Kami and has resulted in a number of important developments and products such as the Migration and Infrastructure Atlas. Kami and the saiga MOU provide a good platform for cooperation among Central Asian countries and support in our efforts to conserve the species. We would like to take the opportunity and thank the government of Switzerland and Germany for their financial support which helped the Secretariat to make significant progress in implementing the initiative. We therefore fully support the document and the program of the work and look forward to continue our cooperation under this initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Uzbekistan. I will take Wildlife Conservation Society.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you very much to the EU, UK, Switzerland, Mongolia, and Uzbekistan for their interventions. The CAMI initiative is indeed highly successful and a great model that we hope can be extended to other regions. WCS was pleased to work with the CAMI range states and the CMS Secretariat on several projects under the previous program of work, most recently the Central Asian Mammals Migration and Linear Infrastructure Atlas. We strongly support continued work on additional modules for a global atlas on animal migration, and we believe this information should be aggregated and provided to decision makers. It's extremely useful and important. We note that data collection and presentation are only as useful as their provision to decision makers, and strategic planning for maximizing the value of such efforts is critical. We congratulate the CAMI range states for their efforts to take management actions based on the CAMI Atlas and the CAMI process. For example, WCS and in addition, WCS Mongolia, our staff in Mongolia, were very pleased to have assisted with and attended the September 2019 CAMI meeting that has been mentioned by Mongolia and others. We recommend that parties adopt the proposed amendments in Resolution 11.24 in Annex 1 of this document and the program of work, as we've heard from all interventions. We note the comment from the Scientific Council that the program of work is ambitious, we agree, and would benefit from prioritization. Among the activities of the program of work, we recommend a continued focus on upstream elements of planning and mitigating the impacts of linear infrastructure in particular, as well as managing the wildlife, livestock, human health interface, as these are critical conservation challenges in this region. We look forward to future collaborative efforts on the next program of work and on all collaboration with CAMI range states. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, WCS. Young Naturalist Network.
Thank you, Chair. Young Naturalist Network is supporting the document.
Thank you all. I propose that we refer this document to the working group for finalization and request that those with comments, especially EU, to make them available as soon as possible so that the document can be finalized by the working group. We shall now start the program for today. All along we've been dealing with backlog. So we are now going to start our program. We shall now move to agenda item 29. Credentials Committee already reported yesterday. I do not think they have any update. We can hear from them tomorrow if there are new credentials that have been considered. So let's move to 20. I invite the Secretary to introduce document 20 on national reports.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Secretariat would like to introduce document 20, which reports on national reports submitted to the Conference of the Parties. As instructed by Decision 12.4, the new template was prepared by an informal working group and adopted by the 48th meeting of the Standing Committee. The document also puts forward a decision for consideration of the Conference of the Parties to guide future work in case a revision of the template is deemed necessary. The Secretariat would like to highlight that in some instances, the data provided by national reports were insufficient to complete other tasks dependent on such information, such as assessing progress in the implementation of the Programme of Work on Climate Change and Migratory Species, or legislation implementing Articles 3, 4a and b. Parties may also wish to consider strengthening the formulation of some questions to better reflect the reality in their countries and regions. As of February 22, actually this morning, we received the last national report. It sums up 95 national reports have been submitted to the COP, the highest number of submissions ever. The analysis has been possible thanks to the voluntary contributions of Switzerland and Germany. With your permission, Mr. Chair, a representative from WCMC will present the main findings and lessons learned from the national reports submitted by parties. Thank you, Chair.
WCMC.
Thank you very much. This presentation will summarize briefly some of the key findings from the analysis of national reports, focusing in particular on the main successes reported by parties, the major threats to migratory species, the impact these are having, and the difficulties parties reported in implementing the Convention. The format of the national report was revised in 2018 and now closely aligns with the Strategic Plan for Migratory Species, providing information to help assess progress towards each of the 16 global targets included in the plan. The new template was used for the first time in this round of reporting, and the results will provide a baseline for assessing trends in future analyses. National reports were received from 79 parties in time to be included in the analysis. Since then, 16 additional reports have been received, representing nearly 3/4 of the parties to CMS. All of the national reports are available on the CMS website and provide an invaluable resource for all stakeholders, and we encourage everyone to consider the multiple ways in which this information could be used. National reports indicated that progress is being made in a number of areas. In particular, parties are working to enhance policy frameworks, to improve knowledge and to raise awareness, and to promote cooperation between countries and across sectors. Measures for protecting sites, as well as managing and restoring habitats, were the most commonly reported successful conservation action. A few examples of other successes included the development of national species red lists and the implementation of action plans for migratory species. And finally, 59 parties reported that they now prohibit the take of all Appendix 1 species in their country. Despite notable progress being made, however, there are also areas where more action is needed. In particular, parties reported that the range of threats and pressures are having a severe negative impact on migratory species. The main threats were reported to be habitat loss and degradation, and these were also the pressures that were most commonly ranked as severe and as showing significant negative trends. Other key threats highlighted in the report included illegal hunting, climate change, and bycatch. Parties were also asked to report any major changes in conservation status of CMS species in their country, and while positive trends were reported for some species, mainly for terrestrial and aquatic mammals, the major trends reported for bats, birds, and fish were more negative. However, this is just a snapshot of major changes, and a more systematic assessment could provide a clearer picture as to whether migratory species are truly improving or deteriorating. The most commonly reported barriers to effective implementation were insufficient resources and capacity, and in their national reports, parties emphasise the extent to which this is hindering their efforts to conserve migratory species. Other key areas where support was reported to be needed included technical and scientific support and exchanges of information. So, in conclusion, positive action is being taken, but there is still more work to be done to safeguard migratory species, including ensuring all CMS parties prohibit the take in Appendix 1 species, a continued focus on addressing habitat loss and degradation and the other key threats to migratory species, and increased support and coordination amongst CMS stakeholders to fulfill the ambitions of the Convention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretariat and WCMC. I now invite distinguished delegates to discuss Document 20 together with its annexes, Annex 1 and Annex 2. I recognize Yemen. Yemen, you have the floor.
Oh, sorry, it's Brazil, actually. It's not Yemen. Okay. We thank the Secretariat for analyzing the national reports, and we would like to state that we will support the inclusion in the budget of the necessary resources for the analysis of national reports, as stated in the activities of Scenario 4 of the budget. The national report must be the main form of gathering information from the parties. Additional questionnaires should be avoided because they create a heavy burden on technical staff, usually are answered by a very limited number of parties, and many times are incomplete and duplicate efforts from the many environmental multilateral organizations. We will send to the Secretariat a suggestion of new text for Decision 13.AA, reflecting the importance of having these resources in the core budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. European Union.
Thank you, Chair. The European Union and its member states thank the Secretariat for the analysis of CMS national reports to COP13 contained in Annex 2. We support the deletion of decisions 12.4 and 12.5. We also support the adoption of the draft decisions contained in Annex 1. However, having in mind that the synthesis report recognized the gaps in current reporting format, we are of opinion that revision of the reporting format needs to be done in the intersessional period. Additionally, we suggest that this revision should further consider strengthening of the synergies within the CMS family and with reporting processes of other multilateral environmental agreements. The EU and its member states will submit the proposed changes in writing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. EU. Do you have any further requests for the floor? I see none. We shall wait to get a proposed revision from EU, and then we shall look at the revised decisions with the inclusion of proposed EU comments. Thank you very much. Let me now invite the Secretariat to introduce Document 21 on application of Article 3 of the Convention.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Secretariat would like to introduce Document 21, which has been prepared due to several reports of CMS parties having engaged in international trade in CMS Appendix 1 species. The document was developed in close cooperation with CITES Secretariat. This document foresees efforts to better understand the extent of such incidents, parties to examine their national legislation on this topic and take steps to address such occurrences, and that the relevant information is made available to assist parties to raise awareness and build capacity. Addendum 1 to this document contains the comments from the Scientific Council. Considering that the prevalence of such incidents and the potential impacts on CMS-listed species are not known, the Scientific Council requested the Secretariat to conduct a preliminary assessment of the scale of the issue, which has been presented under Information Document 37. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Secretariat. I invite comments on document 21. European Union, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I speak on behalf of the EU and its member states. The resolution in its current form does not provide a clear analysis of whether or not, and if so, under which circumstances, the export, the introduction from the sea, or import of an Appendix I species contravenes the Convention. The lack of clarity in the proposed resolution on this crucial point is unfortunate because it is a serious matter of legality or illegality under international law. We welcome the recently available info document number 37 containing the analysis undertaken by the Secretariat of CITES trade data about the international trade of CMS Appendix I listed species. We agree with the Secretariat that this is a good starting point, but that the further research and more in-depth factual and legal analysis of these issues is needed, with a detailed focus on effective implementation of the Convention. At this stage, we are not inclined to supporting a resolution as it is proposed, but would support a decision that mandates the Secretariat to undertake further analysis on the matter and provide recommendations or draft decisions as appropriate for parties to consider at COP14. Additionally, we propose that the Secretariat liaise with the CITES Secretariat and, as proposed by the Scientific Council, prepare and publish on the CMS website a list of species included on CMS Appendix I, which are not listed on CITES Appendix I for parties' information. We are proposing to amend the draft decision accordingly and will provide the proposal in writing. Thank you.
Thank you, EU. Let's hear from United Kingdom.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Secretariat for preparing this paper and for drawing parties' attention to this matter. We've carefully considered the information provided in Document 21, as well as the analysis of CITES trade data undertaken by the CMS Secretariat provided in Information Document 37. It is our view that whilst this is a helpful first step, it serves to highlight that this issue is not straightforward and clearly demonstrates significant gaps in our understanding of the full nature of trade in CMS Appendix I listed species. There are a number of areas where, in our view, greater clarity is needed. We have undertaken a brief examination of the data as presented in InfDoc 37 relating to the UK. This demonstrates the complexities involved in interpreting trade data and the risk of making assumptions about the circumstances in which specimens in trade have been taken from the wild without a more detailed analysis. For instance, the data as presented doesn't include reference to the dates when take from the wild actually occurred, which may have been prior to the species listing in CMS Appendix I. Moreover, some of the trade data relates to the non-lethal take of specimens, which is permissible under CITES, for instance, the trade in vicuña hair and fibre. Critically, the information presented does not provide sufficient clarity with regards to whether and under which circumstances the export or import of a CMS Appendix I species is in contravention of the parties' obligations under the Convention. Without such clarity, the United Kingdom cannot support the draft resolution. It is our view that it would be more appropriate to undertake intersessional discussions between relevant parties, the Secretariat and the CITES Secretariat, with a view to clarifying the data, the nature and the scale of the issues, and ensuring effective implementation of the Convention. We suggest that the Secretariat then return to the next conference of the parties with a more robust consideration of this issue, along with any recommendations or decisions as appropriate for parties to consider. We support amendments to the draft decisions to this effect. We also agree with the recommendation of the Scientific Council requesting the Secretariat to liaise with the CITES Secretariat and publish on the CMS website a list of species included on CMS Appendix 1, which are also listed on CITES Appendix 2 or 3. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, UK. Let's take South Africa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. South Africa welcomes with appreciation the work done by the Secretariat in this agenda item. However, South Africa has the following submission. For example, in its preamble, the document recognizes that commercial utilization is a threat to many species in Appendix 1 of the Convention. However, it should be noted that it is not always the threat. It can offer conservation benefits when undertaken sustainably. Recognizing in Operation Paragraph 1 that there is a difference between taking and international trade. Recognize in Operation Paragraph 1 that requirements to prohibition the taking of Appendix 1 species only applies if none of the grounds of exceptions are satisfied. Possible deletion of the wording in relation to parties reporting on imports and exports, since this is already undertaken by CITES for CITES listed species. Possible request that Secretariat to develop more detailed guidance on the exemptions permitted by Article 3.5, including on the scope of sustainable commercial utilization under this provision, and present for adoption by the next COP, rather than simply mandating the Secretariat to advise parties on what constitutes adequate legislation when the parties themselves have not yet endorsed guidance for interpreting what is adequate in the context of Article 3.5. South Africa will be submitting comments on the document for consideration now. Thank you.
Thank you, South Africa. Let's take Australia.
Thank you, Chair. Australia appreciates that there are certain species included in Appendix 1 of the CMS that are also included on Appendix 2 of CITES, where trade of the species is regulated. While we appreciate the Secretariat's attempts to address this matter, and certainly appreciate the level of work that has gone into preparing the InfDoc 37, we believe that the issue requires further consideration before a resolution can be agreed. For example, the current draft resolution states that the import or export of an Appendix 1 listed species contravenes the obligations associated with Article 3, Paragraph 5 of the Convention. Unfortunately, this subject has not been discussed by parties previously, and we understand that the Vienna Convention on Law of Treaties provides that treaties need to be interpreted in good faith in accordance with their ordinary meaning, in their context and in light of their object and purpose. In light of the definition of taking provided in the CMS, an ordinary meaning of the term would not appear to encompass the import and export of endangered migratory species. We also have concerns that references in the proposed resolution and decision potentially expand the meaning of taking in an inconsistent manner with the interpretation outlined in Article 1, Paragraph 1, Subparagraph I of the Convention. Australia would be happy to share our concerns further if discussion on this matter continues. Thank you.
Thank you, Australia. Let's take Israel.
Thank you, Chair. We too would like to really commend the Secretary for preparing this document and highlighting this important issue. We will start with where we agree, which is on the Scientific Council's suggestion to prepare better information on the website about cross-listing or listing by species both in the Appendix 1 of the CMS and Appendix 2 and 3 of CITES. However, we would like very much to support at this time and at this COP meeting the drafting or the passing of a resolution on this issue and not to postpone it for another 3 years, as was suggested by EU, UK, and others. We believe that application of Article 3 of the Convention regarding international trade in Appendix 1 listed species is a critical issue and has been pointed out by the Secretariat. The way that the draft resolution is worded maybe goes a little too far, and we would concur that there are needed amendments to this resolution, and we would hope that if we can propose language to make the resolution a little more in line with what's known about this phenomenon at this stage, we can bring some of the other parties that objected on board to actually pass a resolution and not just to push it off with a decision to do a study for another 3 years. We have suggested some text on the draft resolution that we feel would be acceptable to other parties, and we would seek your recommendations how you would like us to go ahead with presenting this, or perhaps as a drafting group, or to read our suggestions. Chair, what would you suggest?
We would have a contact group on this issue that will further process different views and come back to us with what would appear to be the mutually beneficial way forward.
Yes, in that case, Chair, we'll reserve our specific recommendations at this time to save time, and we'll bring it up at the contact group, which we would very much be request to be part of. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Israel. Let's have Peru.
El Perú también desea apoyar este documento en la aprobación del proyecto de resolución que figura en el anexo 1 del presente documento y también en adoptar los proyectos de decisiones que figuran en el anexo 2. Este documento invita a las partes a que desarrollen y apliquen legislaciones nacionales y medidas de cumplimiento, prohíban las actividades que conllevan la importación o exportación de las especies que figuran en el apéndice 1 y que infringen las normas de la Convención y por tanto minan sus objetivos. Y también insta a que aporten información a la Secretaría acerca de la importación y exportación de las especies de apéndice 1 de manera periódica, de tal manera que pueda haber un registro más real. Asimismo, se solicita a la Secretaría que difunda entre las partes información sobre la importación y la exportación, ¿no?, de las especies de las que estoy mencionando, del apéndice 1, y que desarrolle una lista de especies que figuren tanto en el apéndice 1 de la Convención de CMS, pero también en el apéndice 2 de las CITES. Y las publique en su sitio web y las revise y vuelva a publicar si fuese necesario. Es muy importante para nosotros tener una claridad de qué especies que están en el apéndice 1 de CMS están siendo objeto de comercio en las CITES. Y también espero, al igual que el país de Israel, que se apruebe en esta COP este documento. Gracias.
Thank you, Peru. Let's take New Zealand.
Thank you, Chair. New Zealand thanks the Secretariat for raising this important issue and for the analysis covered in Information Paper 37. New Zealand agrees with others that the import and export of species listed on Appendix 1 of CMS has potential to undermine the Convention. However, we too have some concerns, as highlighted by previous speakers. New Zealand supports further work on this issue in the intersessional period, and we're happy to contribute further to drafting of a resolution and or decision. We'd like to be part of a contact group. Thank you.
Thank you, New Zealand. Let's have Zimbabwe, followed by Norway.
Thank you, Chair. Zimbabwe shares the same sentiments as expressed by New Zealand. We believe that procrastination will not make a difference for the species that we seek to conserve and protect. And we strongly believe that this is a very important matter which needs further discussion during this COP and perhaps come up with a resolution. And there's work that we need to do in the intersessional period not to wait for the next COP. Thank you very much, Chair. And Zimbabwe will be interested in joining the contact group for this important subject matter.
Norrie?
Thank you very much, Chair. I would like to also echo what has been presented by several of the other interventions. This is indeed a new area for CMS, and maybe on high time to put and shed light on this issue. I think it's the trade in Appendix 1 species is just an example, and not to be focused, too much on. But it clearly shows us that we need to look at the requirements of the convention. Maybe there are other issues as well, and therefore we also need to look at things like definitions, and we need to look at the national legislation program on guidance, assisting of parties. So I would like to support what has been suggested, as this is, I can testify that this is a rather complex issue, which we discussed last autumn in November, and probably not something we can solve in a few or in a short time. So an intersessional working group would be probably the best, and reverting back to the standing committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Norrie. Let's take CITES.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. CITES and CMS share common origins, have complementary mandates, and enjoy long-standing and deep pragmatic collaboration reflected in joint multi-annual work plans since 2005. The cross-border aspects of CITES and CMS is why both conventions rely upon strong international cooperation coupled with strong and effective domestic action. At CITES COP13, 183 parties to our convention again broadly endorsed and recognized this good and constructive collaboration between the two conventions. And for a number of important joint species, COP18 adopted new specific measures explicitly directed to both CMS and CITES and calling for collaborative implementation. At the same time, the criteria for the inclusion of species in the appendices of CITES and CMS are different, which explains why the species listed on the CMS and CITES are not automatically provided the same level of protection under both instruments. The conservation and management measures under both conventions, while complementary, may also be different, including in relation to trade resulting from the capture, hunting, or fishing of listed species. The CITES Secretariat is generally of the view that the principal objectives and scope of CMS are not related to international trade. CMS Article 3 provides that parties that are range states of a migratory species listed in Appendix 1 prohibit the taking of animals belonging to such species, with 4 exceptions that do not mention national or international trade. Article 3, paragraph 5 only applies to range states of the species, whereas, for example, in this proposed resolution, in the document, there is mention of imports, which may imply obligations beyond this national jurisdiction. The proposed resolution, for example, in its 5th preamble paragraph, seems not to recognize that well-managed and well-controlled international trade in CITES-listed species has a track record of contributing to the conservation of the species, including for species that are listed in CMS Appendix 1, such as the vicuña. The text does not well reflect that import or export of CITES-listed species that are also included in CMS appendices may not necessarily involve the take of such species in violation of CMS provisions, or that imported or exported animal species may originate from captive breeding, ranching, or aquaculture facilities, and again would not be relevant to the concerns raised in this draft resolution. As the title of the draft resolution in the document suggests, its main intention seems to remind parties of CMS of their obligations regarding the application of Article 3 for Appendix 1 listed species, but this should be based on a common understanding of these obligations. We are not convinced of the need for a resolution that focuses solely on the import and export of such species. We would, however, support decisions directed to the CMS Secretariat to collect information on the take of CMS Appendix 1 listed species and to examine apparent violations of the relevant provisions in Article 3, in line with the comments from the European Union, United Kingdom, Australia, and others. The CITES Secretariat stands ready to assist the CMS Secretariat to the extent possible in this undertaking. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, CITES. Let's have WCS.
Thank you, Chair. And this intervention is being made on behalf of NRDC, the International Environmental Law Project, Defenders of Wildlife, and WCS. Our organizations generally support the draft resolution in Annex 1 and the draft decisions, including amendments proposed by the Scientific Council. We greatly look forward to seeing those amendments that were mentioned by the delegate from Israel, and hope that the situation, any disagreement can be resolved and the parties can come to agreement on text. We consider the effective implementation of Article 3 to be a critical element of CMS implementation. And CMS needs to provide clarity to parties how to effectively implement Article 3, including, when appropriate, preventing the international trade of specimens of CMS Appendix 1 listed species coming from the wild. International trade, however, is only part of a broader discussion on how to improve the implementation of Article 3. CITES doesn't regulate take, for example, and it's absolutely critical that CMS parties look at this, though certainly they're related. You can't export an Appendix 1 species removed from the wild without taking it from the wild. There are related discussions on how to adopt regulations and legislation found in Document 22 and an ongoing debate on exceptions provided for the take of species on Appendix 1. We urge the parties to adopt a resolution and decisions at this COP. As Israel said, let's not let this linger for 3 years, though 3.5 years till the next COP, though we do agree it would be useful to have a contact group and indeed potentially an intercessional working group on how to improve implementation of Article 3, both on international trade, but also in particular on take of CMS Appendix 1 listed species. And we look forward to engaging and participating in the contact group that is established. Thank you very much.
Thank you, WCS. Let's take Senegal.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Je viens dans le même sillage que l'orateur précédent par rapport à l'article 3, qui est l'essence même de la Convention sur les espèces migratrices. Je pense qu'aujourd'hui, au niveau du Sénégal, notre législation nationale est en train d'être actualisée et on est en train de prendre en compte les annexes de la CMS et de la CITES dans notre législation nationale. Je pense qu'une clarification de cet article par rapport à son utilisation doit être faite dans les plus brefs délais pour quand même qu'on puisse ne pas avoir des confusions dans l'application de cet article. Merci.
Thank you very much, Senegal. I want to propose, given the complexity and sensitivity of this issue, that we set up a contact group, as indeed expressed by several delegates. I want to suggest that New Zealand, you chair that contact group, and all interested parties and NGOs can participate in the discussion. Let's make it as broad the discussion as possible, so that all interests can be considered. So New Zealand take the lead on the discussion of this issue and get back to us with a solution that is agreed by all parties and as much as possible all delegates. So you have a tall order, but I know you will deliver it. Is that acceptable to the rest of the delegates? I see nods, so New Zealand kindly take lead of the contact group and revert to us with a mutually agreeable position. Of course, parties that have expressed interest do participate in the contact group.
We should try to.
New Zealand?
Chair, thank you, Chair. New Zealand is happy to facilitate a contact group on this issue. If the Secretariat could please advise us on an available room and appropriate timing, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Let me invite the Secretariat to right away propose the logistical arrangement for this working group, given that it doesn't have to clash with other existing groups. Secretariat?
Thank you, Chair. We are finding out the room, and we will inform the plenary this morning. If there is any advice, whether you prefer to meet at lunchtime or afternoon, please let us know.
I think lunchtime there is budget already, so we should be looking at some other time other than lunchtime. Zimbabwe, you want the floor? Kindly take the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We thought probably we would benefit from getting an indication of who is interested in the conduct group that is be led by New Zealand, so that it's easier even on part of the Secretariat to communicate with the interested parties, IGOs, NGOs, on communication so that they can streamline the mailing list. Thank you.
Okay, I will do just that. There is a proposal to have the contact group sit concurrently with the budget committee at lunchtime. Do we have any objection to having the two sit concurrently at lunchtime? Israel?
Thank you, Chair. I realize that there's always going to be some conflict, but lunchtime today would not be appropriate for us as a small delegation with only one person. We would prefer it in the evening if possible, please.
New Zealand?
Thank you, Chair. Could I please request that the timing doesn't clash with the Aquatic Working Group? We are a small delegation and will need to be attending that. Thank you.
It's got to be lunch.
Okay, let me first take the request from Zimbabwe to know who is interested in participating in the contact group. Press your request for the floor as an indication that you will participate in the working group, rather the contact group. I see it's about 25, quite a big number, 25, so we could open it, I think, so that it is an open-ended working group, since almost everyone is interested. Let's make it open. So the Secretariat will communicate to everybody on the room. The time is still a problem. We have a clash, but let's make a choice. Let's make a choice between lunchtime and evening. What would be There are clashes on either side. Israel, what would you propose?
Thank you, Chair. As I mentioned previously, for me personally, I would prefer the evening. That's our personal choice.
I still request for the floor from United Arab Emirates. United Arab Emirates, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, it was by mistake.
European Union, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The European Union's member states would prefer to do it at lunchtime in view of the many working groups that are already meeting in the evening. However, we also would raise the question if there's not the possibility of doing it in parallel to the COW itself.
Oh, that's an interesting proposal from EU. It could deliver us. Can't we have it concurrently with the COW? We ask, but the problem is the interested delegates are many. We may have problems of quorum where we have few delegates, but if that's okay, I'm happy to go with it. Can we have it concurrently with the Committee of the Whole? That would solve the puzzle. Do you have any objections to having the contact group proceed as the Committee of the Whole proceeds? If there are objections, let me see your flags. Sound is a solution. So, New Zealand, there seems to be consensus that we can have the two run concurrently, the contact group as well as the Committee of the Whole. So, let the Secretariat identify a room, communicate the room, and then the delegates will have to divide, and we have the contact group go on as the Committee of the Whole goes on, and that solves the conflict at lunchtime as well as the evening. Thank you very much, EU, for that innovative proposal. All right, we shall move to agenda item 22. Let me invite the Secretary to introduce document 22 on review mechanism and national legislation program.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Secretariat would like to introduce document 22, which reports on the progress to implement Resolution 12.9 and decisions 12.6 to 12.9 on the establishment of a review mechanism and a national legislation program. In relation to the review mechanism, the draft template for the communication of a possible implementation matter was prepared by the Secretariat based entirely on the admissibility criteria adopted by COP12. The template was adopted by the Standing Committee and it's contained in Annex 1. Since the template was made available over a year ago, the Secretariat has not received any communication that has triggered the procedure of the review mechanism set out in Resolution 12.9. The Secretariat will continue its efforts to promote the availability and use of the review mechanism. In relation to the National Legislation Program, the Secretariat had been requested to prepare legal inventories and a questionnaire based on the information accessible through the national reports and instruments of ratification and accession. However, these sources were inadequate to ascertain compliance with Article 3.5. Consequently, additional steps were undertaken to fulfill the request from the COP. The Secretariat developed a questionnaire for parties to complete in order to fill in knowledge gaps concerning implementation of Article 3.5. 39 countries submitted the completed questionnaires to the Secretariat. The responses were used to prepare an initial set of legislative guidance materials and a model law for the implementation of Article 3.5, contained in Annex 2 and 3. The Secretariat will be able to finalize the analysis and recommendations soon, which will result in the drafting of national legislation profiles. It was agreed by the 48th meeting of the Standing Committee that information regarding the implementation of Article 3, paragraph 4A and B will be collected from the national reports. However, the data received was not sufficient to fulfill this task. The Secretariat carries on these aspects of Decision 12.6 and proposes to collect legislation from parties that have submitted the questionnaires to be able to prepare technical guidance on best practices relating to Articles 3, 4A and B. The document proposes the adoption of new decisions that will provide guidance regarding the implementation and promotion of both activities. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. I now invite comments on document 22. I recognize Australia.
Australia thanks the Secretariat for the work it has undertaken on the National Legislation Program. Upon examination of the legislative guidance material contained at Annex 2, we note that a section references out-of-date text from Australia's National Environmental Law, the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act of 1999. Paragraph 43 of the guidance material should be amended to include the correct text, and we'll be happy to provide the correct material to the Secretariat for incorporation. Thank you.
European Union.
Thank you, Chair. The EU and its member states take note of the template for communication on a possible implementation matter contained in Annex 1, legislative guidance material relating to implementation of Article 3, paragraph 5, contained in Annex 2, and model law for implementation of Article 3, paragraph 5, contained in Annex 3. We also agree to delete decisions 12.6 to 12.9. The EU and its member states also support the adoption of the draft decisions with some changes, and the changes are necessary, from our point of view, in order not to lose sight of the requirements of Resolution 12.9 with respect to the National Legislation Program. The National Legislation Program is a very important step forward for CMS. For that reason, as was decided at COP12, the program also covers Article 3, paragraphs 4A and B of the Convention as Article 3, paragraph 5. These obligations contain some essential obligations, such as the removal of barriers and restoration of habitats, and the questionnaire of the National Legislation Program should also include questions on those paragraphs, as was decided at the last COP. In that regard, Chair, we are proposing several changes regarding draft decisions 13AA, 13BB, and 13EE, which are quite extensive in nature, but essentially implement what I just said, that we are looking forward to, well, we would like to include into the questionnaire these questions on Article 3, paragraph 4A and B. And I ask for your advice, Chair, whether you want me to introduce the changes that we also send here, or how to proceed. Thank you.
Given that you alluded to the fact that the changes are comprehensive, we can as well, depending on how other delegates think, we can think of another contact group on this issue. But you can leave the comprehensive comments for now, what I take is that you have some changes to make. Continue and finish, European Union.
Thank you, Chair. And as I said, I think the changes are not that substantive in substance, but rather just implement this one point that I was raising. So we are proposing changes in draft decision 13AA directed to the Secretariat. And we would like to delete the existing paragraphs B and C and add new paragraphs A, B, C, and G. And these new paragraphs will give a mandate to the Secretariat under A to revise the National Legislation Program questionnaire to include requests for information on the implementation of Article 3, paragraphs 4A and B, as was already requested in order to implement Section 2, paragraph 2 of Resolution 12.9, which we adopted at the last COP, and as was decided in Decision 12.6, para C, adopted at the last COP. Furthermore, under paragraph B, we would give a mandate to the Secretariat to promote the completion and submission of the revised National Legislation Program questionnaire by parties and its submission to the Secretariat. Under a paragraph C, we would give the mandate to the Secretariat in cooperation with relevant partners to support parties as necessary and subject to available resources through the provision of, inter alia, guidance materials, model laws, technical assistance and capacity building workshops in relation to Article 3, paragraphs 4A, 4B, and 5, as provided also in Resolution 12.9, Section 2, paragraph 7, adopted at the last COP. And finally, under G, we would ask the Secretariat to ensure participation in the discussions on the review mechanism for post-2020 global biodiversity framework. That, in a sense, is a different point where we would like to ensure that exactly that happens, where we have discussions on the review mechanism, that the Secretariat would be involved in those debates. And as a consequence, Chair, the existing paragraphs A, D, and E will become paragraphs D, E, and F, and that's an editorial point. Furthermore, in draft decision 13BB directed to the Standing Committee, we would propose the deletion of para B, and in draft decision 13EE directed to parties, we propose that the new paragraph A reads, parties are strongly encouraged to submit information regarding their legislation and other domestic measures relating to implementation of Article 3, paragraphs 4A, 4B, and 5. And again, that was provided in as provided in Section 2, paragraph 2 of Resolution 12.9 on the basis of a questionnaire developed by the Secretariat. With addition of this paragraph, the existing paragraph B should be deleted and the existing paragraph A will become paragraph B. I hope everyone could follow. Finally, we stress the need, and I said that to explain one of our changes already, the need for the CMS Secretariat to be involved in the relevant discussions on the review mechanism to be developed in the context of post-2020 global biodiversity framework, just to stress that point again. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, European Union. Do we have any further requests for the floor on this agenda item? Okay, I see no request for the floor. That could suggest that the proposals by EU are generally agreeable. So let's have the proposals submitted to the Secretariat. They be included in the amended document, and then we can look at it later. We may not need a contact group given that there are no contrary views. Is that agreeable, that we receive the written comments from EU, the Secretariat integrates them, and then we look at the document later? I see no objection, so that will be the approach. Let me invite the European Union to introduce document 27.4 on reservations with respect to amendments to appendices 1 and 2 of the Convention. I understand Germany will present this document. Germany, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I still speak, as in my previous intervention, on behalf of the EU and its member states. And we, the EU and its member states, proposed the draft resolution contained in the annex in Annex 4 to document 27.4 on reservations with respect to amendments of appendices 1 and 2 of the Convention made after the 90-day deadline. In the past, the CMS depositary government accepted late reservations in case of unanimous consent of all parties to the Convention, based on Article 19 and 20 of the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties. We are convinced that acceptance of late reservations after the 90-day deadline could generate legal uncertainty, and therefore proposed this resolution. And additionally, we noted that the Convention does not contain any guidance stating which date is to be considered the date on which a reservation is withdrawn. And for that reason, we believe that the draft resolution will give clear guidance to the depositary government and to the parties with regards to the admissibility of reservations and with regards to their withdrawal. And allow me to say, Chair, the same approach was adopted at the 18th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to CITES. The EU and its member states invite all parties to support the proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, EU. I will open the floor for discussion of document 27.4 as introduced by European Union.
I give it afterwards.
Israel?
Thank you, Chair. We thank the EU for preparing this document and highlighting the issue of reservations and seeking ways to clarify how they are used and to make sure that the information on their use is clearer. As we mentioned in the opening session the other day, we feel that the use of reservations, although the Convention actually allows it, does undermine to some extent the obligations and goals and the overall effectiveness of the treaty. And we would prefer to see in the language of the resolution, in the preamble at least, and if not, maybe in the actual operative paragraphs, specific language to that effect, urging parties not to use reservations unless there's some specific national reason why such a reservation is necessary. And to give the impression that not just the impression, but to emphasize that the reservations is not necessarily the best way to go when a party uses them. We didn't prepare any specific text. If you allow us, we could submit it maybe, or just speak to the EU about trying to incorporate this into the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Israel. Do you have any further requests for the floor on this? Brazil?
Thank you, Chair. Just regarding the comments by Israel, we'd just like to say that we also have to be careful and remind ourselves that the reservation is also a measure of flexibility in the convention, and that it is necessary to maintain these possible ways of adapting the convention to each country's needs. I think not necessarily every country will present reservations. It is usually something that is not common, but it is a valid resource for many countries, and we would like to see the language that will be proposed for this. Thank you.
Conservation first. Thank you, Brazil.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to echo the comments of Brazil. And reservations are a sovereign right of any parties in this convention and in other conventions. And nothing and nobody could impede a party to exercise its right. And according to the document presented to the document presented by the European Union, the Vienna Convention is very clear, and we think that further legal advice from the UN Legal Office should be sought on this matter, because some reservations were lodged only few days, if not hours, after the deadline. So there should be a certain flexibility in this, and the Vienna Convention provide for this flexibility. So the issue is much more subtle and has much more legal implications than the document of the European Union provides. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Conservation first. Do we have any further requests for the floor on this? If there is none, I will request the Israel to provide the text that is proposed to be added, and I would request that that be done in consultation with Brazil. So let me request Israel, EU, and Brazil to look at the proposed addition, and once it is agreed, it will be submitted to the Secretariat. Since EU is the proponent of this document, I will request EU to take lead of that small friends of the chair, that with Brazil, Israel, and EU to agree on the text to be added. Just to add that, of course, the text must be in the spirit of the convention, and indeed in the spirit of Vienna Convention, to which we all subscribe. Does that seem to be an acceptable way forward on this issue? I see no objection, so EU kindly discuss with Israel and Brazil and agree on the best way forward, and then you submit the text to the Secretariat. Let me invite distinguished delegates to focus on document 23.1 on review of decisions. I now invite the Secretariat to introduce the document.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Secretariat would like to introduce document 23.1, which reports on the implementation of those decisions that are not addressed in any other document. The document also makes recommendations to the Conference of the Parties on further action to be taken in relation to these decisions, namely their deletion or renewal. The following decisions have been proposed for deletion: 12.2 and 3 on the Scientific Council, 12.15 on Communication, Information and Outreach Plan, 12.89 and 90 on Sustainable Tourism and Migratory Species, 12.102 on Taxonomy and Nomenclature, 12.105 on Sustainable Development and Migratory Species, 12.106 and 7 on arrangements for hosting the 13th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. The following decisions have been proposed for renewal: 12.36 to 39 on the conservation of African Eurasian vultures, 12.53 and 54 on the conservation and management of whales and their habitats in the South Atlantic region. The Secretariat would like also to recommend to the Conference of the Parties the deletion of 2 decisions addressed in 2 COP documents, but without an explicit recommendation of deletion. Decision 12.1 on the rules of procedures, now that the Secretariat has completed its work and the rules of procedures have been adopted. And Decision 12.42 on the adverse impacts of anthropogenic noise on cetaceans and other migratory species, as new decisions have been proposed in document 26.2.2 Ref 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. I will now invite comments on document 23.1. I do not seem to see any requests for the floor. Yeah, I see Nora now.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to congratulate the Secretariat for following up on the last COP, and it is important to review all decisions and make a new list after each Conference of the Parties, which is very useful for not just the committees but also the parties' Secretariat on their tasks in the coming triennium. So it's a very good exercise, and encourage the Secretariat to follow up on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Nore. Do we have any further requests for the floor on document 23.1? I see no requests for the floor. Do we have any objections to this meeting adopting the decisions in annex to the document 23.1? I see no objections, so I take it that this meeting agrees that these decisions in document 23.1 be recommended to the plenary for adoption. Let me invite the Secretariat to introduce document 23.2 on review of resolutions in respect to decisions 12.11 and 12.12. Secretariat.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This document reports on implementation of tasks directed to the Scientific Council in Decision 12.11. That is the review of Resolution 7.18, Rev COP 12, regarding the range state agreement for the dugong conservation. Resolution 8.16, Rev COP 12, on migratory sharks, and Resolution 6.3 on the Southern Hemisphere albatross conservation. It should be read in conjunction with document 26.2.7 on constrictor species, sharks, rays, skates and chimeras, which was already introduced yesterday. The document proposes to repeal Resolution 7.18, Rev COP 12, and Resolution 6.3, Rev COP 12, and the deletion of 2 decisions, 12.11 and 12.12. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. I now open the floor for discussion of document 23.2. I do not see any requests for the floor. I now come back to the meeting. Do we have any objections to recommending decisions and the resolution contained in 23.2 for consideration by plenary? I do not see any objections. I take it that this meeting recommends the deletion of decision 12.11 and 12.12 and repeal of resolution 7.18 Rev COP 12 and resolution 6.3 Rev COP 12. It is so recommended. Let's proceed to document 24. I invite the Secretariat to introduce document 24 on review of the conservation status of migratory species.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. As exception to the, rather brief introduction that we are doing in general to document, we would like to give a bit more details on this document, which is a kind of document being submitted to the COP for the first time. So we have prepared for that a PowerPoint presentation. I'm mindful of time, try to avoid to go into too much detail, but at the same time would like to illustrate some of the main analysis and compilation of data that we have undertaken in the compilation of this report and have some consideration on that. This just illustrates briefly the structure of the document that has been submitted, which consists of a cover note, which includes a draft decision and a series of technical annexes. The preparation of a report on the conservation status of migratory species has been in the agenda of CMS for a number of years. Without going too much back in time, just reminding the decision of the last meeting of the Conference of the Parties, the COP12 in Manila endorsed the preparation of a report on the conservation status of migratory species as an activity to pursue within the CMS program of work for 2020. Since COP12, the Secretariat has been fundraising for the production of the report, but unfortunately, the fundraising effort have not been able to produce sufficient resources to contract out the production of the report as it was intended when the activity was included in the program of work. And while fundraising efforts are being continued, the Secretariat has decided to undertake a compilation of information on the conservation status of migratory species covered by CMS appendices, using its own capacity with a view to submitting at least a preliminary review to COP13 and as a stepping stone towards the production of a more comprehensive report that we consider should be the aim of the Convention. The document which is in front of you is document 24. A preliminary version of this had been submitted to the fourth meeting of the Sessional Committee of the Scientific Council, who had reviewed it and made a series of recommendations for its further development, which have been then taken into account and used in the production of the current version, of which the one in front of you is the Rev 1, which they added a few further consideration and later analysis with respect to the version that was submitted by the deadline. Well, basically, the main exercise that we have undertaken has been the compilation of information concerning the status, trend, and threats according to the red list of IUCN, using information extracted from the red list database. And this has been done for all the 173 species, including Appendix 1, the 273 species listed on Appendix 2, and in addition, species considered covered under Appendix 2 by higher taxa listed in the appendix that brought to the total to 530 species. We hope you all had the possibility of looking at the document. This is the basic form in which the information has been compiled in a tabular format for all the species considered. Now, on the basis of the information so compiled, we have undertaken a series of analysis, preliminary analysis on those data, which I would like to very briefly illustrate with the following slides. The first analysis that we have undertaken is the analysis of the percentage of species assessed in the different red list categories for the three main clusters that I already mentioned. And then, not illustrated in this slide, for each cluster for the main higher taxa, the mammals, birds, reptiles, and fish. Another analysis that we have undertaken is the percentage of species assessed in the different categories of population trends. Again, for the three main clusters by appendix and for the main taxa. This slide illustrates only the main analysis per cluster by appendix. And then we have undertaken analysis of threat as categorized and defined by the IUCN Unified Classification of Direct Threats. Well, this just the slide illustrates one of the how the analysis has been conducted, considering all the three different hierarchical levels that the IUCN classification of threats considered. This has been done for all species and also in disaggregation by groups and within groups by regions. Then, in addition to this compilation and analysis that we have undertaken at the Secretariat, we have been able, thanks to funding from the governments of Germany and Switzerland, and in synergy with the work undertaken for the assessment or the implementation of the strategic plan for migratory species, we have also been able to contract analysis of some key indicators which are already considered by the strategic plan for migratory species. These indicators include, in this case, is an indicator on the coverage by protected areas of key biodiversity areas identified as important for migratory species. We have been able to produce different disaggregation of this index. The previous one concerned in general all CMS listed species and all migratory species considered by IUCN, and in this case, in this other slide, we illustrate disaggregation by regions. Another index considered is the Red List Index, which is well known. We have, again, different disaggregation that we have been able to produce. This work has been done by BirdLife International on behalf of WCMC, who was contracted by us. Most of the data presented concern birds, which were the group for which data were more reliable. We are not going to illustrate all of these in these slides. And also in this case for various regions. Finally, the last index we have been able to consider is the Living Planet Index that monitors the average change of abundance of vertebrate species over time. Again, this has been done for various disaggregation, and the work has been done by the Zoological Society of London. These are included in separate annexes. And this is a disaggregation of the Living Planet Index by major taxa. I think we can skip this. Okay, I would like just, in concluding, making some very general consideration on main findings. Again, this slide illustrates the analysis by of the various categories in which species are assessed. One consideration that is obvious is that while many of the species listed correspond currently to the guidelines provided by the Convention through Resolution 11.33 in terms of listing. However, a certain number of species actually are assessed in categories that in principle would not qualify for listing under CMS. This is no doubt the result of the history of the Convention, that the different the change in criteria for species listing, but potentially also of genuine change of the conservation status of species over time since they had been listed. And this seems to be, and was also recognized by Scientific Council as one of the elements that would need to be analyzed in greater detail in any further development of this report. Another consideration concern the trends in species in the conservation status of the species listed in the appendices. Not surprisingly, perhaps a majority of species has a decreasing population trends, which go up to three quarters of all species on Appendix 1. and around 50% of species on Appendix 2, with significant differences among the taxa, with birds and fish appearing as the groups with more rapid decline. At the same time, there are also situations of population of species with the host population is stable or increasing, which again could well represent, success stories in terms of conservation. And then, in terms of analysis of threat, with all the caution that this would require, one obvious consideration that appears the fact that biological resource use appears to be by considerable margin the threat impacting the highest number of species. This requires a lot of caution, as I was saying, but as in itself, this seems to suggest the need and desirability of further analysis. And basically, these short consideration are those that inform the draft decision that is proposed for consideration to the Conference of the Parties in terms of mandate to the Secretariat for further work. And I think I can leave it at this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretariat. I will now invite comments from delegates on document 24 and its annex, which contains draft decisions. European Union.
Thank you, Chair. The EU and its member states welcome the document prepared by the Secretariat and support draft decisions presented in Annex 1 of the document with minor changes which we will submit in writing. We further welcome the continuation of this work envisaged in Programme of Work for next triennia. We consider this report to be first step in the analysis and review of conservation status of migratory species listed in the appendices. We recognize the importance of further work and in-depth review of Appendix 1 listed species that do not meet listing criteria, especially with regards to circumstances under which they were originally listed, and to provide recommendations whether these species still merit Appendix 1 listing. However, we emphasize we do not wish to encourage the listing of any species without prior thorough and scientific analysis. Furthermore, we are deeply concerned with the information given in Annex 3 of the document, which shows that 96% of all Appendix 1 listed species are impacted by biological resource use, which includes intentional use, hunting, and collecting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, EU. Please forward the proposed changes for consideration. Australia.
Australia thanks the Secretariat for preparing this item. Australia was supportive of the development and application of the CMS guidelines for assessment of Appendix 1 and 2 listing proposals, so we note with interest that of the species currently listed on Appendix 1, only 86 or 50% meet the current criteria for listing, and 155 or 59% meet the criteria for listing on Appendix 2. We recognise that the mix of conservation status on both appendices is a historical legacy. Many species are included in the appendices prior to both clear interpretation of terminology used in the Convention and the establishment of the current guidelines. The credibility of the Convention is important. Not only should listed species be clearly migratory, but they should also have an unfavourable conservation status. Parties should be focusing on species with the greatest need. We would question why species with an IUCN Red List ranking of least concern are included on either appendix. Australia supports the proposed decision to undertake an in-depth review of the conservation status of species listed on Appendix 1. We note that attention will first be focused on those species assessed as least concern on Appendix 1, and it may be that some of these species would benefit from remaining on the appendices. Some may be a good news story for the Convention, and some may require delisting. Until this issue is looked at further, it is difficult to determine which species could benefit from remaining as listed on the appendices and which species should be removed. We understand the draft decision at Appendix 1 was not available for discussion at the Sessional Committee meeting in November last year. We would therefore appreciate it if the Secretariat could elaborate the intention behind including a directive to undertake an assessment of the impact of direct use on the conservation status of species listed on Appendix 1. This recommendation is at Decision 13AA, subparagraph C. It is unclear why, of the threats acting on Appendix 1 listed species, direct use has been singled out for this particular assessment. Thank you.
Thank you, Australia. May I kindly once again request the interpreters to give us only 5 minutes. Thank you very much. I will now take South Africa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. South Africa knows and appreciates the work that has been done so far under the preliminary report in relation to the conservation status of migratory species. However, acknowledging and noting that Annex 3 of this document only talks to the global population listed, not even considering geographic population in some species as indicated in the document. Based on this, South Africa, for consistency purposes, South Africa would like to recommend geographical population or regional assessment to be considered in the review process in moving forward, especially to give a clear picture in terms of conservation efforts that are happening on the ground. For example, in the region, we do have the Red List of Mammals, which was developed in 2016, and this provides the latest status of mammal conservation or conservation status that is happening in the region. Thank you.
Thank you, South Africa. I have IUCN, UNEP, and the IFAO. I am going to give you 1 minute each, strictly 1 minute. If you have a long statement, kindly submit it to the Secretariat for inclusion in the meeting report. Let me take IUCN.
Thank you, Chair. IUCN welcomes the draft decisions in Document 24 and is ready to support their implementation where possible through contributing its expertise on analysis of data included in the IUCN Red List. With regard to the proposed assessment of the impact of direct use on the conservation status of Appendix 1 listed species in Draft Decision C, we note there are potential overlaps with work proposed in several other draft decisions in Document 21 on application of Article 3 of the Convention and Document 26.4.3 on addressing unsustainable use of terrestrial and avian wild meat. And we would encourage coordinated implementation of these decisions. IUCN would also like to note that the conclusions of the Sustainable Use Assessment currently being conducted through the Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services will also be relevant to this issue. IUCN will be working with Zoological Society of London and other partners to support this assessment by providing a detailed analysis of the impact of use on the extinction risk of species assessed on the IUCN Red List, which we expect to be published in mid-2020. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, IUCN. UNEP WCMC.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. UNEP WCMC would like to highlight the importance of this work to the overarching goals of CMS. While the preliminary analysis showcased by the Secretariat, as well as the progress report for the strategic plan, provide a good starting point, as a convention, we still do not yet have a full picture of the state of migratory species. To fill this knowledge gap, we need to make a concerted effort. For this reason, we are supportive of further work to develop a review of the conservation status of migratory species, as well as a more depth review of the conservation status of Appendix 1 species. We would also like to point out that there will be a new process undertaken in the CITES context to look at their Appendix 1 species that may provide insights as this moves forward within CMS. Thank you.
IFAO.
Thank you, Chair.
As this is the first time IFA has taken the floor, I'd like to extend our thanks to the Government of India for hosting this meeting. I'm making this intervention on behalf of I4, BirdLife, Born Free, Humane Society International, NRDC, Ocean Care, WCS, WDC and WWF. In the interest of being brief, I'll shorten it but send the full document to the Secretariat. Our organisations welcome the intent to more systematically assess the status of migratory species listed under the Convention. However, we wish to note also that the preliminary analysis of the IUCN status of CMS species highlights that collectively 22% of species listed on Appendix 2 are rated by IUCN as extinct in the wild, critically endangered or endangered, which under CMS guidelines suggests they would qualify for an Appendix 1 listing. The analysis also shows that resource use of these species is by far the predominant threat, affecting 93% of all Appendix 2 listed species, which further suggests an Appendix 1 listing may be of merit. Therefore, we recommend that parties amend the draft decision 13AAB to also review Appendix 2 species listed as endangered, critically endangered, or extinct in the wild to see if they merit listing under Appendix 1 of the Convention. As the Executive Secretary said herself at the opening of this meeting, the Convention is not keeping pace with the biodiversity crisis we are facing. Any review of the status of migratory species should help ensure that we are not letting any species fall through gaps in our Convention. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, IFA. We shall wait to receive written comments for improvement of the draft decisions, and then we shall, of course, have another opportunity to look at it later. Brazil, are you asking for the floor? Because we have lost time. The interpreters gave us only 5 minutes, and they are over. But let me give you half a minute.
I'll be very quick. Just to say that we think that the proposed text language by IFAO seems a great idea, and we would support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. That's very good. So forward the written comments to the Secretariat, and we shall have another opportunity to look at it as CRP. This brings us to the end of our morning session. This meeting is thus adjourned. We meet again at 3. Enjoy your lunch. There are announcements, administrative announcements by the Secretariat. Kindly listen to them.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I want to let people know that the working group on the application of Article 3 will meet in Exhibition Hall 1, Working Group Room 5, beginning with the afternoon session today. Second, there will be 2 signing ceremonies immediately after this session closes relating to the Raptors MOU and the Sharks MOU, and hopefully you can stay for that. Thank you.